Project Sunflower Harmony by HoopyMcGee. Chapter 5 Housewarming. Erin. Her hoofs were cracked and broken as they pounded along the dark soil of the forest floor. The air smelled damp of rot and of things growing in shadow. Branches whipped at her coat, cutting and bruising her as she ran. Her breathing came in gasping sobs, the painful stitch in her ribs like a knife being driven in her every time she drew a breath. She was being herded or pulled toward something horrible, all while a voice muttered and laughed in her ears. Her heart was thudding, and a panicked sense of desperation was welling in her as she tried and failed to stop herself from running. On some level, underneath the terror and pain, Erin was aware of it being the same old nightmare once again. There was a clearing ahead of her. She couldn't see it, but the part of her that was aware she was dreaming had been anticipating it for some time now. She broke through some bushes and stumbled into the clearing with a sense of relief welling up behind her terror, only to have both fade away in mute confusion. Princess Luna stood alone in the clearing, tall and regal, with her dark ethereal mane streaming away from her. This was something that Erin was almost certain had never happened before. "Hello, Erin," Princess Luna said. The pain faded the instant Erin stopped thinking about it. She took a step forward, her mind whirling in confusion as her sense of what was real and what wasn't started reasserting itself. "Princess Luna, what? You were having a nightmare. One that you have had before, I presume?" "Yes." Erin glanced around the clearing, noticing for the first time how the landscape around her blurred and fast at the edge of her vision, like it was only actually there when she was looking directly at it. It was disconcerting. "Not for a while, though. This is the first time in weeks." "My apologies." Luna bowed her head. "I would have offered my assistance earlier, but I could never find your dreams before." "Oh!" Erin glanced down at herself. She was dreaming of her previous body, the one resembling an earth pony. She frowned at the bleeding cuts up and down her legs, which vanished even as she looked. "Because I wasn't part of the magical field?" "Most likely," Luna replied. She looked around the clearing with a thoughtful expression on her face. "When I spoke to you in Canterlot about your feelings regarding Prince Verdant, I was unaware of exactly how much harm Malachite had done to you." "I see." Erin hesitated before continuing. Luna's statement had the feel of an apology to it. She took a moment to consider her answer. "Well, what I said still applies. I can't blame Verdant for what Malachite did to me." Luna tilted her head and perked her ears forward. "Though perhaps he serves as a reminder?" Erin shuddered and she dropped her eyes to the forest floor. "Yes, he does. I'm sorry." Luna shook her head. "No need to apologize. It is something we will keep in mind should you visit the castle again. We can keep him away." "Don't do that," Erin blurted without thinking. She blushed as Luna arched an eyebrow at her. There probably weren't that many people who said things like that to the princess. "I mean, I don't need to be treated like I'm broken. I'm not. I'll deal with it." A resolve firmed in her chest, and out of the corner of her eyes she could make out several indistinct figures standing on either side of her. "Even if it takes a while, I can deal with it. I have my friends with me." The look on Luna's face was unreadable for a long moment as she stared at her. Then she looked at the figures. Twilight, Applejack, and Pinky to Erin's right, Fluttershy, Rarity, and Rainbow on her left. Luna looked back at her with a gentle smile. "Very well, I am glad to see that I am not needed here." Powerful wings unfurled like twin sheets of midnight and beat downwards. As Luna rose into the air, she called out, "I shall leave you, then, to the care of your friends. Erin, sleep well." The dream distorted, the forest dissolving into a fractal kaleidoscope of colors, all centered around the princess, who promptly vanished. The colors of the dream started to fade and wash away as the shapes became blurry and indistinct, like a watercolor in the rain. Erin looked to her left and then her right. The dream-created versions of her friends still stood with her, smiling gently. "Well, that was sure different," Erin said. And then a giggling dream Pinkie Pie smacked her in the face with a coconut cream pie. Raka. "So, this is nice." Raka looked around her friend and colleague's office. Various small items, mostly touristy stuff, were displayed prominently on bookshelves, sharing space with what looked like scrapbooks and family albums. Photos of grinning children and young adults beamed at her from every wall, and even from the desk itself. She quirked an eyebrow at her friend. "Very homey, very you." Maggie Hansen laughed and waved her hand. "Well, you know how it is. I spend so much time in the office it might as well be my second home." She leaned forward and said, "I wasn't expecting you to show up the very next day after I called you. Didn't I mention that we can't open the gate to Harmony for another month?" "Maggie, I have to be honest with you." Raka cast a wary glance over her shoulder as if someone might be listening in, before leaning in and stage whispering, "I've grown to hate being on the road." Maggie gasped with a look of mock horror on her face. "No, not Raka Rockstar Nayar, the globe-trotting biologist." She clasped her hands together under her chin. "Say it ain't so." Raka giggled like she hadn't done in a long time, at least not since she'd last shared an apartment with Maggie during grad school. Of course, her oldest friend would still want to use that stupid old nickname. "Well, I thought the sooner I came out, the sooner I could fix all the mistakes in the mission plan," Raka replied, leaning back with a smirk on her face. "Is my team assembled yet?" "Most of them work right here," Maggie replied. "So yes, we're interviewing a few geologists, meteorologists, and some other specialists. We'll also need some medical staff, security, and engineers." Raka raised an eyebrow. "Security?" "There's life on the planet." Maggie shrugged. "No signs of civilization so far. No structures, no radio transmissions, nothing. But that doesn't mean that the local wildlife can't be dangerous. So yes, actual security with actual guns." "You know how I feel about that." Raka's eyes narrowed as she folded her arms across her chest. "We shouldn't be going armed to a new world." "We shouldn't be going helpless either," Maggie countered. She sighed and laid her hands flat on her desk. "It's not up for negotiation. I'm not going to have my best friend end up in the belly of some alien carnivore." "Fine." Raka rolled her eyes. "Though you have to admit that would be at least an interesting way to go." They both chuckled at that, and for a while the conversation lapsed into a comfortable silence. Then Raka noticed a look come over her friend's face and sighed, knowing what was coming next. She'd been expecting this, but that didn't mean she had to like it. Especially not from Maggie. "I'm sorry about this, Raka, but you know I have to ask," Maggie asked in preparation for the inevitable question. "How's your health these days?" Raka grinned at her through clenched teeth. At least Maggie had the decency to look apologetic about it rather than pitying. "I'm fine, Maggie," she said. "Full remission, currently cancer-free." "Right," Maggie said, nodding. "It's just that—" "For goodness sake, Maggie, I've gotten this from everyone I know." She scowled across the desk at her friend. "Yes, I've lost a lot of weight. Yes, I look awful, but I'm fine, really." Maggie frowned right back at her. "That's not what I was going to say." Raka leaned back, eyeing her warily. "Oh? What I was going to say is that we have an ascent facility here. You may have heard of it." Maggie grinned at Raka's suddenly sheepish expression. "Oh. Yeah." Maggie folded her arms and leaned back, looking altogether too smug. "We could use our ascent facility to double-check and make sure you're fine, and correct any problems before we send you out into the field." Oh, Raka repeated. Well, how long would that take? Maggie grimaced. It's an older facility. We can't do targeted fixes like the new ones. We'd have to put you under for a week, maybe longer. Oh, Raka considered this for a moment before shaking her head. No, let's hold off until I get back. I want to make sure we have plenty of time for planning. Maggie leaned forward in her chair, eyebrows knitting. Raka, we have a month. Over a month, actually. There's plenty of time. Raka laughed and shook her head. Maggie, I know you don't go out in the field much, but you have to trust me. There's never enough time for planning. Fine, fine. Maggie held up her hands in a gesture of surrender. How about we start with an introduction to some of your soon-to-be teammates? Oh, yes. Raka sat up eagerly, her eyes sparkling. You're sending a unicorn with me, is that right? Just one, though there will be a team of ponies from Canterlot as well. But Spectral Charm will be reporting directly to you. Oh, I can't wait to meet him. Raka clapped her hands excitedly. I bet he's wonderful. Maggie's face froze for a second before thawing into a careful smile. Oh, he's something else all right. Let's go and meet him, shall we? Twilight. It was early enough in the morning that the regular hustle and bustle of Ponyville's streets was just getting started. Twilight stifled a yawn, momentarily regretting the time she'd spent the night before pursuing the thick and densely illustrated tome Fantastical Flora and Fauna before finally turning in. It had been a fascinating book, but right at the moment she'd rather have had the extra hours of sleep. Pinkie Pie was apparently having no such trouble, seeing as she was bouncing happily along next to her while humming a song that was entirely too chipper for that time of day, at least as far as Twilight was concerned. Pinkie Pie had stopped by the library a half-hour earlier, and only the basket of full freshly baked warm muffins she'd been carrying for breakfast had stopped Twilight from grumpily suggesting that she come back in an hour or two, or possibly even 3. The muffins had made a pretty good breakfast, all things considered. There were still a good half-dozen left in the basket that Pinkie was somehow managing to balance on top of her head as she hopped along. Twilight's admittingly bleary mind wandered its way back to the subject at hoof. So, Fluttershy actually refused to take the money? That got Pinkie to stop bouncing. She landed with a thud on all 4 hoofs and started walking beside her with a frown on her face. She sure did, Pinkie said, her ears drooping. Something about it being a gift from Sunflower and she couldn't take the money for it now. But the 4 of us agreed, Twilight said, frustrated. We'd all chip in and get Erin a feather care set, and I know AJ and Rainbow Dash would chip in too if we asked them. Then what Pinkie said sunk in. Wait, she said it was a gift from Erin? Yep. Pinkie shook her head. I didn't get it either. Dang it, I'm usually the one who's random, not Fluttershy. Twilight shook her head. Well, we can talk to her later, I guess. After we check on Erin, of course. Pinkie's face returned to its normal sunny expression. Of course! They balked, or in Pinkie's case, bounced until Erin's house came into view, the sight of which caused Twilight to feel a small spark of satisfaction. She'd been lucky to find the place for her friend, and Erin's obvious appreciation of her new living space had really done wonders for Twilight's spirits. The pair of them let themselves through the gate and then knocked on the door. A few seconds later, Erin opened the doorway, eyes widening in surprise as she saw the 2 of them. Hey guys, Erin said as she broke out into a wide smile. Hey, Sunflower, Pinkie said. Can we come in? We brought presents and muffins. Housewarming gifts, actually, Twilight added with a smile. Just some things we thought you could use. Of course you can come in. Erin stood aside to make room. Please excuse the mess, though. I'm sure it's not to... Twilight trailed off, staring at boxes, some of them open with their contents scattered across the floor. Wow. I know. Erin was clearly embarrassed, judging by how she ducked her head and scuffed a hoof along the floor. I've been looking for something. Do you need any help? Pinkie asked as she passed the muffin basket over. I'm a great finder. Oh, no, Pinkie, that's okay, Erin said with a wide-eyed, frantic grin. I actually just found what I was looking for, and I'm glad you're here, actually, because they're presents for you guys. Pinky gasped. We get presents too? Yes. Erin's eyes twinkled as she laughed. But first, can I get you guys anything? I have all sorts of goodies left over from last night's party. Oh, and I also found a care package my mom somehow managed to sneak into my stuff. It's got a bunch of cookies in it. Oh, cookies! Pinky's ears perked up. What kind? Well, they were chocolate chip, of course, Erin said. Naturally, Pinky said with a sage nod. There were also some peanut butter ones, some sugar cookies, and some snickerdoodles. That sounds great, Pinky said. Then she frowned and shot Erin a sidelong glance. What's a snickerdoodle? Twilight looked at Pinky in confusion. Pinky, she started to say. Erin tilted her head at Pinky. You've never had a snickerdoodle? I don't think so. What is it? Erin grinned at her. Only the best kind of cookie ever. I'll go get you one. She trotted off into her kitchen, calling over her shoulder. Twilight, do you want one too? Sure, Twilight said uncertainly. Okay, 1 minute, Erin said as she disappeared through the doorway. Twilight turned to Pinky, who was grinning hugely. Pinky, I'm pretty sure you know what a snickerdoodle is. Pinky fluttered her eyelashes innocently. Oh? Yes, Twilight said with a frown. I'm positive. I think you've even made them before. I have? Yes. In fact, there's even a man in town named Snickerdoodle. She has a snickerdoodle for a cutie mark. Really? Yes. Twilight stomped a hoof. How can you not remember? She trailed off, looking at her friend's face. There was that grin, of course. But now it had been joined by a mischievous glint in Pinky's eyes. Oh. Things started to click in Twilight's mind. Oh. She cast a wary glance at the entryway to the kitchen, where the sounds of dishware clinking around could be heard. She leaned towards Pinky and whispered, Is this a prank? Are we playing a prank on Erin? I'm going to be honest, Twilight, Pinky said with a smirk. I have no idea what you're doing. The big grin erupted on her face again. But yes, I'm just playing a little joke. Oh, goody. Twilight clapped her hoofs together and giggled. Can I help? Pinky's eyes narrowed for a moment, her mouth setting in an even line. Twilight stood rigidly as Pinky studied her, presumably judging her readiness to assist her with the pranking. When Pinky's face suddenly erupted into a full-blown smile, Twilight sagged with relief. You sure can, Twilight, Pinky replied with a grin. Her twinkling blue eyes narrowed as she leaned in to whisper conspiratorially into Twilight's ear. You have to make absolutely sure you relax and act casual. It's really super-duper important that Sunflower doesn't catch on, or else the whole joke is ruined. Right. Twilight nodded vigorously. Oh, here she comes. Twilight couldn't help a little hop of excitement at being on the giving side of the joke for once. Pinky's eyes widened. She whispered fiercely. Twilight, remember to act casual. Right. Twilight took a deep breath and let it out, trying to settle her nerves. Right. Twilight quickly put on a casual smile as Erin trotted back into the living room with a plate loaded with cookies balanced on her back. Well, here we go? Erin stopped and cocked her head as she stared right at Twilight. Everything okay, Twilight? What? Twilight felt a moment of panic at the thought that Erin might have already figured out the prank. She shot a frantic glance over at Pinky, who widened her own eyes back at her. She looked back at Erin and put even more effort into making her smile look casual. Why would anything be wrong? Well, it's just... never mind. Erin shook her head. Not a big deal. Anyway, snickerdoodles, here you go. Twilight breathed a sigh of relief as Erin, apparently still fooled, reached around and pulled the plate off her back with her teeth. She sat down, transferring the plate to her upturned hoofs and holding it out so that the other two ponies could select one of the golden brown cookies. Twilight nabbed one with her magic and took a small bite. Twilight was too distracted by the prank to even notice the taste of the cookie aside from a vague sense of something cinnamon. This is really good. Your mom is a pretty good baker. Pinky was licking her lips. Judging by Erin's shocked expression, Twilight could only assume that Pinky had eaten the whole thing in one bite. Can I have another? Sure." Erin held out the plate again so that Pinky could take another cookie. Then she looked at Twilight and asked, "Are you sure you're okay?" As far as Twilight could tell, the look on Erin's face was one of suspicion. With a sense of dread, and with a few strands of her mane breaking away from her normal straight style, she forced an even more casual smile towards her friend. "Yes, of course. Why wouldn't I be?" Pinky snickered next to her, and it was all Twilight could do not to start laughing too. This prank was getting really hard to maintain. "It's just, well, if you need the bathroom, it's right over—" Erin wasn't able to finish the sentence because Pinky fell on the floor shrieking with laughter. The dam burst in Twilight and she started laughing too. Mostly because of the successful prank, but also in relief that it was Pinky who broke first. Erin just gave them a bemused look with an uncertain smile which made Twilight laugh even harder. Guys," Erin said as the laughter started to die down. "Everything okay?" Twilight's ribs were aching from laughing so hard, but she still managed to say, "Yes, it was a prank. We actually knew what snickerdoodles were this whole time. We so got you." For some reason, this set Pinky off into a new round of guffaws. Twilight giggled, though she wasn't really sure what had set Pinky off again. Erin joined in, finally getting the joke. Or at least, that's what Twilight thought at first. "That," Erin said, wiping a tear away from her eye with a fetlock, "was almost too lame to even be a prank." Then she grinned at Twilight and added, "That look on your face. I thought you were constipated." "I wasn't," Twilight started to say. She was interrupted when Pinky whooped with renewed laughter, rolling onto her back and kicking all 4 legs in the air. Erin joined in, laughing so hard that her legs went a little wobbly. Twilight was the odd one out now, chuckling along but confused. After a minute or two, the latest round of laughter started dying down. "Thanks, Twilight!" Pinky let out a happy sigh while still lying on her back. "Considering it was such a silly idea for a prank, you helped it turn out so much better than I expected." "Wait, I don't understand." Twilight looked back and forth between the other 2 mares, feeling totally lost. "How was it a silly idea? We got her." Pinky looked up at her, snorting with laughter, and then groaned, holding her ribs. "No more, Twilight! My tummy hurts from laughing too hard." Erin was looking at her with an entirely too amused expression for some pony who'd just had an awesome prank pulled on her. Twilight shook her head confused. "I don't get it." Any attempt to gain further understanding of the current situation was complicated by her friend's renewed laughter. Luna. Princess Luna, Warden of the Night, Guardian of Dreams and the Regent of the Moon, was assaulted very nearly the moment she opened the door to the royal sister's private dining hall. She had been planning on a hearty meal and a calm discussion with her sister before retiring for the day. What she got instead was a small green Alicon colt dodging between her legs to reach the hallway behind her, followed a moment later by the colt's beleaguered nursemaid slamming into her with a startled cry. Luna blinked as she was knocked half a step back. The mare who had run into her staggered backwards in a protracted fall that ended up with her finally landing on her rump. The nursemaid, a light golden unicorn mare named Honeyheart, shook her head before looking at what she'd run into. When she saw that she had, in fact, run full tilt into Princess Luna, Honeyheart's eyes bulged as she gasped and scrambled to her hoofs. "1,000 pardons, Princess." Honeyheart bowed, with her muzzle very nearly on the floor. "The young princess being rambunctious this morning." With a grimace she added, "As usual." Luna rotated an ear, catching the sound of the giggling colt as she bolted recklessly down the hallway. A moment later, Prince Verdant squawked indignantly as Luna lifted him in her magic and began floating him back towards the dining hall. "It is of no concern," Luna said as she brought the prince back towards the doorway. "I believe this is what you were looking for?" "No!" shouted the somewhat less than regal prince. "No, no, no!" It was one of only a small number of words that he knew, though new words were appearing with startling regularity. Some, apparently, he had learned from his guards. which had prompted Celestia to pronounce that certain words and phrases were not allowed to be used near the young prince.
"Thank you, Your Highness," Honeyheart said with a bow. "The young prince has been quite a... But,"
Verdant cried out, demonstrating yet another word from his ever-expanding vocabulary. Honeyheart froze with a very cautious look descending over her features.
"I was going to say challenge."
She cleared her throat and, horn lighting up, took the little prince from Luna. Verdant's legs began galloping in mid-air while his little wings flapped crazily. Once again he demonstrated his unhappiness by unleashing the most terrible invectives in his vocabulary.
"But, no, but—"
"That is language quite unbecoming a prince," Luna admonished. This, apparently, was when Prince Verdant first became aware of the fact that there was another pony involved in his reincarnation. He left off glaring at his nursemaid and instead gaped at Luna.
"Auntie Vu!"
he shrieked directly into his nursemaid's left ear. Honeyheart flinched and folded down her ears. Luna offered her a sympathetic smile before addressing her nephew. "Good morning. How are you today?"
"Good, hug."
Verdant's struggles ceased as he flung his forelimbs out. Luna arched an eyebrow at him.
"What do we say when we want something?"
Prince Verdant looked puzzled for a long moment. Then he broke into a sunny smile.
"Please hug."
"Very good, nephew." Luna offered him a gentle smile. She leaned in and, while he was still floating in Honeyheart's magical grip, gave him a gentle hug and graciously endured a sloppy kiss on the cheek. The guards on either side of the doorway maintained an air of stoic indifference regarding Luna's slobbering, much to their credit. Honeyheart bowed again.
"Thank you for catching him, Princess. He always gets a little squirrely during breakfast, and he is quite the escape artist."
"We can't have that, can we?" Luna said as she finally entered the dining hall fully and shut the door behind her. She put a serious look on her face. "Now, nephew, are you going to finish your breakfast properly, like a big pony?" His answer was a rarely used, "Yes!" Verdant ran over and plumped himself down on a cushion next to the low breakfast table and remained sitting there with relative calm as his nursemaid began helping him with his breakfast. One of the palace servants, a mare in a nondescript black dress and white apron, took her breakfast order. As the servant left to prepare the meal, Luna turned to speak to Honeyheart as the mare tried to entice the young prince into eating. "My sister is once again too busy to join us?" Luna hadn't intended to sound critical of her sister, but, judging by the way the nursemaid's face tightened in apprehension, it seemed that her statement was taken that way. When Honeyheart answered, it was in the carefully measured tone that the palace staff seemed to use so often around her.
"Yes, Your Highness. It seems Princess Celestia has a very full morning scheduled."
What could be so important as to miss yet another mealtime with her sister and adopted son? Luna was certain that Honeyheart would know that she wasn't just asking an idle question. In her duties as nursemaid, she was kept informed of Celestia's schedule down to the minute, just in case she needed to reach her in the unlikely event of an emergency.
Well,
Honeyheart fidgeted with her hoofs.
Princess Celestia mentioned that she would be joining us after meeting with the Nobles' Council.
I see. The mare lapsed into a silence, broken only by Verdant's incessant babbling. The prince, though technically only a few months old, had the physical and emotional development of a colt at least 2 years in age, and all of the energy and curiosity of a room full of kittens. Luna suppressed a smile as she looked at him, while Honeyheart did her level best to keep the young prince eating his breakfast.
"You are quite good with him,"
Luna noted. The compliment made Honeyheart beam happily.
"I can only do my best, Princess."
The humility implied in her statement at odds with her confident tone and level gaze.
"I raised several of my own after all, and the young prince is very much a joy to care for."
Luna winced as a large glob of airborne applesauce impacted with a wet splat against the side of the nursemaid's head and began to ooze viciously down her neck.
"Very much a joy,"
Honeyheart repeated with a fixed smile. Luna chuckled as the nursemaid used a linen napkin to clean herself off. A short time later, a unicorn wheeled the breakfast cart into the room. In addition to the bowl of sweet porridge she had asked for, Luna also chose several small tarts and some fresh fruit from a silver tray. The addition of a carafe of fresh apple juice rounded out the breakfast nicely. The servant bowed and began to back out of the room. "Leave the cart if you would," Luna said. "Celestia may join us later." The servant bowed again. "Of course, Princess." Once again, the only ponies left in the room were Luna, Verdant, Honeyheart, and 2 servants who were waiting on any orders that might be forthcoming. Luna ate her porridge as Verdant, temporarily out of energy and with a full belly, began yawning hugely. "I think it's nearly time for a nap," Honeyheart said softly.
"No,"
the prince replied. Luna shook her head. "Not quite yet. Celestia will want to see him before he takes his nap."
"Of course, Princess."
Luna ate quietly while Verdant's head bobbed lower and lower, only to snap back up as his eyes blinked owlishly every minute or so. Eventually, no amount of willpower was enough to keep the prince awake. He flopped over onto his cushion and curled up like a puppy. Luna caught Honeyheart's eye and gestured her closer. The mare stepped quietly in order to not wake the prince and sat down, eyeing Luna curiously.
"Honeyheart, perhaps you can answer a question for me,"
Luna asked in a low voice.
"If I can, Princess, I would be happy to."
"My sister has never raised a child before. The closest she's come is taking on the occasional apprentice. Granted, she relies upon you and several other palace servants, but my curiosity is piqued. How well does Celestia do with Verdant?" A panicked look washed over the mare's face.
"I wouldn't presume."
"No, of course you wouldn't," Luna replied quickly. "Have no fear. This conversation will remain between the 2 of us. I swear it." Honeyheart eyed the 2 servants in the room out of the corner of her eye. Luna sighed and faced the pair of them. "Now would be a good time for the both of you to get some refreshments for yourselves, don't you think?" The unicorns exchanged a glance before looking back at Luna and bowing in unison. When they left, they closed the door softly behind them. "I shall speak frankly," Luna began once they were alone. "I am concerned. My sister seems to delegate most of Verdant's day to various palace servants. Is there cause for alarm?"
"I can't say, Princess Luna. I really—"
Luna leaned forward and placed her hoof on Honeyheart's leg. "Have no fear of reprisals. I simply need to be sure that Celestia isn't shrinking her duties towards her son." Honeyheart's eyes flashed as her spine stiffened.
"She would never,"
she whispered fiercely as she pulled her leg away.
"Celestia is extremely caring and patient with him. Considering how many other duties she has, I'm amazed how calm and serene she manages to be."
Luna couldn't help but chuckle over that, which seemed to confuse the nursemaid. "I continuously find myself reminded that 1,000 years have passed since my incarceration on the moon," Luna said by the way of explanation. "The Celestia you describe and the one I remember are almost completely different mares."
"How so?"
Honeyheart asked carefully before quickly adding a belated, "Princess." "Equestria was wilder back then," Luna shook her head slowly. "The Celestia I remembered could never be described as serene or calm." "How would you have described me then?" Luna froze for a moment and then turned towards the now open door of the dining hall. Celestia was standing there with an amused smile on her face.
"I would have said passionate and headstrong."
Luna grinned back at her and nodded towards an empty cushion.
"Please join us, sister."
As Celestia moved towards the cushion, she spared a happy smile for the slumbering Prince Verdant. Several bakery items, wrapped in Celestia's golden aura, floated off of the breakfast cart and towards Celestia's place at the table. "So, did I hear you were concerned about how much attention I can spare Verdant?" Celestia asked as she lay down on the cushions. She took a nibble on a pastry as Luna answered.
"Yes, sister, though I meant no offense. I know how difficult it can be for a princess to find the time for personal matters."
Luna flexed her wings and ruffled her feathers. "The stars know I have a challenge warding the dream realms all night. The population has expanded greatly in my absence." Celestia sighed. "Yes, well, that's the price of peace and stability, but I'm glad to pay it." She took another bite of her pastry, her expression thoughtful as she chewed and swallowed.
Nevertheless, you may have a point. I'll try to delegate more of my duties to make sure I spend more time with him." "Yes," Luna said, nodding. "It's only for a short while after all. Once he's old enough, he can join us in ruling this land." Celestia snorted in a very unprincess-like fashion. "Don't be so quick to map out his future, Luna. We didn't get much of a choice in our lives, but I would like him to decide his own course." "Then perhaps we can enlist Aaron as a fourth princess?" Luna asked lightly, attempting to hide her resultant grin behind a lemon tart. Celestia choked briefly on her pastry before levitating a glass of apple juice up to her muzzle and taking a quick sip. "Don't even joke about that," she said, vexed. "I had to spend the last 4 hours attempting to convince that stone-headed noble council that she's not going to have any titles or political powers." Luna laughed at the thought of the panicking nobles, who probably thought that their ancient bloodlines were under threat. "Did they truly believe we'd make her a co-ruler of Equestria?" Luna asked, grinning. "Either that, or they hoped we would use the scent to make any pony of noble blood into an alicorn." Celestia snorted again, this time in disgust. "And I should add, only noble ponies." Luna rolled her eyes. "Naturally." I beg your pardon, princesses." Luna started. Verdant had been sleeping, and Honeyheart had been so quiet that she'd quite forgotten that they were there while the two sisters had talked. It was Celestia who responded to her. "Yes, Honeyheart. I don't mean to interrupt, but it would probably be for the best if I brought the young prince back to his room for the rest of his nap." Celestia looked longingly at the little colt for a moment. Yes, of course, and thank you." "My pleasure, Highness," Honeyheart said as she rose and bowed. The nursemaid's horn glowed, and the prince, cushion and all, lifted gently into the air. She managed the feat so gently that Verdant didn't even break the rhythm of his breathing. Celestia, a wistful expression on her face, watched as the nursemaid left with the little colt floating on his cushion ahead of her. Once the door was closed behind them, she turned back to Luna as her expression turned determined. "I won't fail him, Luna," Celestia scowled briefly. "I'll give him the childhood he'd never had before, I swear it." Luna got up and walked around the table, finally settling next to the elder princess. She draped a wing across Celestia's back and nuzzled her shoulder. "I know you will, sister," Luna said gently. "I know you will." Aaron. Things had finally calmed down at Aaron's house, though Twilight had sulked for a little while after finding out that the prank was nowhere near as funny as her attempt at acting casual. Still, there were presents to hand around, and that brought every pony back to reality pretty quickly. "And here's some baking spices," Pinky said, pushing a bag towards Aaron. "And here's some recipes." She passed the recipe book over as she shot a sly glance at Twilight, adding, "There's even a really good snickerdoodle recipe in there." "Haha," Twilight said, as though she smiled when she said it. "Thanks, Pinky." Aaron smiled as she gathered the items up and set them on an end table. "Well, I brought over a few things too." Twilight pulled the book out of her saddlebag with her magic and floated it over to Aaron. "This is the complete history of Ponyville. I thought you'd like to read it." "Oh, Twilight, thank you." "That's not all. I also brought Beginner's Magic Exercises. It's a Folds book, but I figured since you've never used magic before, this would be something of some use to you." "Oh," Aaron said, eyeing the book appreciatively. Then she looked around the room. "I should probably remember to buy a bookshelf while I'm out shopping today." "So where are our presents?" Pinky asked, her eyes sparkling. "Pinky!" Twilight scolded. Aaron laughed and held up her hoofs. "I'll get them for you. Hold on." Pinky and Twilight waited with varying degrees of patience as Aaron made her way around to the other side of the large central pile of boxes. There were 8 smaller gift-wrapped boxes stacked against the wall and, after checking the labels, Aaron pulled 2 of them out. She stacked the 2 boxes on her back and walked carefully back to where the other 2 were sitting. "Now, before you open them, I need a promise from each of you not to tell the others. I want it to be a surprise for all of you, okay?" Twilight nodded immediately. "Of course." Cross my heart, hope to fly, stick a cupcake in my eye. Pinky mimed the actions as she said them. Well, that will do, I guess, Erin said with a grin. She passed over the gift-wrapped boxes, the one with birthday cakes and balloons going to Pinky, and the one with a star motif being given to Twilight. Unicorn magic made short work of the wrapping paper, and Twilight gasped when she saw what was inside. Is this... Oh my gosh! Pinky said, gaping at Twilight's presents. Damp bits of paper flew as Pinky started using her teeth to pull off the rest of the wrapping paper on her own gift. Meanwhile, Twilight was reverently opening the box, the cardboard sliding open with a soft whisper. Oh my, Erin, this is amazing. Erin grinned hugely. You like it? I love it. Twilight cautiously removed the tablet from the box. Oh, it has my cutie mark on the back. What? Pinky mangled her own box a little bit in her haste. Inside was a glossy pink tablet computer and some accessories. Eyes wide, Pinky slowly and reverently pulled the tablet out and flipped it over to reveal 3 balloons stenciled into the back. Oh, wow! Twilight's own was a purple that matched her coat, with her starburst cutie mark on the back. She stared at it for a long while before looking at Erin. All of them have our cutie marks on them? Erin nodded, joy bubbling up in her as she saw how much her friends enjoyed the gifts. I found them at a place that will customize tablets for you. Also, each one comes with 3 styluses, if you don't want to use voice commands. Oh wow! Oh wow! Pinky was turning hers over and over in her hoofs, making Erin glad that she had asked for a heavy-duty screen protector to be applied. What kind of things can it do? Well, let's see. Erin tapped the hoof thoughtfully on her chin as she considered. A lot of the apps won't work until the Wi-Fi gets set up in Ponyville, but when it does, you can call each other, send pictures, messages, or movies. Oh, Twilight, yours has a bunch of science and history books, along with some fiction, some documentaries too, also a journal if you want to use it. Pinky, yours has a bakery database and a ton of music and movies. Pinky's eyes snapped up. A whole ton? She asked, hefting the thing with a hoof. Erin laughed. Well, not literally a ton, but you could probably play everything on it non-stop for over a month without repeating anything. I remembered that you liked cartoons and comedies, so I put a bunch on there when I was loading it up. Erin, this is... Twilight looked on the verge of tears Erin was startled to see. This is amazing, thank you. Erin smiled as her heart swelled happily. It's my pleasure, Twilight. Sunflower, I have one question, Pinkie Pie said, her voice unexpectedly serious. Erin seriously doubted that Pinkie would end up asking just one question. Yes, Pinkie? How do I turn this thing on? Erin laughed. Why don't I take you both through a quick course on how to use them? It was generally agreed that this was, in fact, the best course of action possible. The 3 friends settled down while Erin happily began teaching them the basics of how to use their new high-tech toys. Okay, first of all, I hope I have all my technical issues sorted out now. I hope so, otherwise this will be like 2 hours of work for nothing. But what do I have to say about this chapter? Yeah. I seriously liked that we get some Luna being in Erin's dreams because, yeah, Erin still has that nightmare when Malachite had possessed her in Project Sunflower. And I can kinda understand that because if you remember, Malachite possessed her and ran her body down. If she hadn't had the augmentations, the implants, then she would probably have died or be permanently crippled if she had been a normal pony. Then we see that Raka, we learned in a former chapter that she wears a wig, and now we know why. She had cancer, okay. And obviously, the Ascent Labs would be able to remove anything that would be wrong with her if she had a new tumor. Pretty interesting to know. I mean, we knew that Ascent was able to correct some terminal illnesses, and yeah, it's interesting to see an example for what
Ascent is able to do in terms of medical care. We also have another nice comical moment when Twilight and Pinky play a prank on Aaron, and the only really funny thing is when Twilight tries to put on a quote-unquote casual smile. I think we remember that. At least I seem to remember the one scene where Twilight's eyes dart from side to side, and she has like that big grin in the show, and that was uber funny. I don't know which episode it was, but I'll look it up. Then of course we have that thing with Prince Verdant, and a little show that he is quite energetic, you could say, but there's one thing that I'm a little confused about, you could say. I mean, of course, Celestia, she's the princess of the sun, and she is busy and has stuff to do, but I think, at least I think so, she wants to raise Verdant, and delegating so much of the time that so much of the time of the days of the prince to servants just doesn't seem right to me, if you know what I mean. I mean, and the next thing would be, we see here that Honeyheart was her name, I think, the nursemaid, has problems controlling the prince. On the other hand, when Luna comes around and starts to talk to the little guy, he's immediately calm, he's obedient, and what's not. So why isn't Luna taking care of him? I mean, okay, she has her duties too, but from time to time she could do it, I think. Yeah, I'm really not looking forward to one particular part that is apt to come with Prince Verdant, because in Project Sunflower at the end we had that part where Luna said to Celestia that she's going to be the one telling him about his past, and I'm really not looking forward to that, because it seems to me like Verdant and Luna have a good relationship, and when she starts telling him that he was actually a crazy face bright monster thingy, I don't know if that will go over well. Yeah. Oh, and of course that the nobles are concerned that Aaron would have any political power. Cool. Really cool. And that Celestia had to reassure them that Aaron would not have any political power or any say in anything, and not be an Alicorn princess. And that got me thinking. I mean, at least I think that, not I think, but from the show we see that Twilight became an Alicorn when she really understood the magic of friendship. And yeah, what would be if Aaron would master something like that? Would she be able to become a full Alicorn then, or not? Because then she would have earned the right to be one, and would the nobles still be able to to say something against it or not? Because, you know, it got me a little confused, and I don't really know how to say it right now. And then, of course, we have the presents Aaron brought for her friends. The tablets with the cutie marks on it. And, of course, Pinky's tablet having a heavy-duty screen protector for the super energetic Earth Pony. I kinda expected something like that, because if you remember in Project Sunflower, all of them were crowded around Aaron's TV, when Aaron was kinda, how could I say that, discovered when she told them the truth about her. They were, after they left her rooms in the hospital, they were in their shared quarters and were watching movies on her tablet. So it was kind of predictable to see that she would bring them tablets. Especially if I remember right, she actually promised Twilight to get her one. Okay, I would like to know your opinion on this. Sincerely yours, Visual Pony.